You know, for years, whenever we talked about bees, the story was always about crisis, right? But that narrative is starting to shift. What used to be all doom and gloom is now turning into this incredible landscape of innovation and, honestly, a lot of hope.
And look, the stakes are just incredibly high. I mean, why are we so focused on these tiny little insects? Well, check this out. Nearly 75% of the crops that feed all of us depend on pollinators like bees. Our entire food system is basically built on their backs.
But yeah, all that crucial work they do, it's under serious threat. Bees are facing what you could call a perfect storm. We're talking about their homes disappearing, pesticides messing with their navigation, climate change throwing off the whole flowering season, and on top of all that, new diseases are just ripping through their colonies. The good news, though, is that we're fighting back, and we're doing it with some seriously creative, science-backed ideas. So, what does this fight for their future actually look like? Let's dive in and explore the amazing range of solutions people are working on right now.
All right, our journey starts in some pretty futuristic places. We're talking about science labs, where brilliant minds are using everything from cutting-edge tech and genetics to, yes, even robotics, all to protect these vital little creatures.
First up, something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, the Robo Bee. Seriously, this thing was developed at Harvard. It's a tiny 80-milligram drone that's this wild mix of robotics and biology. The idea is that one day it could help out natural pollinators, or, in a really bad situation, maybe even stand in for them. And when you look at them side by side, it's kind of mind-blowing how close the engineers have gotten. The Robo Bee is 80 milligrams, which is almost the exact weight of a real bee. But, and this is a big but, look at that last row. A real bee runs on nectar, right? The Robo Bee, well, it still needs to be plugged in, basically, and needs an external power source to fly.
And that power problem, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, think about it. First, deploying billions of these things would cost a fortune. But even more important, it kind of sidesteps the real issue, right? It doesn't fix why bees are in trouble. Plus, we have literally no idea what would happen if we released a bunch of robotic pollinators out into the wild. What could go wrong?
So, what if the answer isn't about replacing bees, but about making them stronger? To do that, you've got to know your enemy. And for honeybees, enemy number one is this nasty little thing called the Varroa destructor mite. It's a total nightmare for them. It's a parasite that latches on, weakens their immune system, and spreads horrible viruses, like the one that causes deformed wing virus. But here's where it gets amazing. Scientists are now breeding bees that can actually fight back themselves. They've found this genetic trait. It's called Veroa Sensitive Hygiene, or VSH for short. So bees with this VSH gene can literally smell when a mite has infected a baby bee in its cell. They uncap the cell, pull out the infected pupa, and boom, they've just stopped the mite from reproducing. It's basically science-guided evolution. So cool.
Okay, so high-tech genetics are obviously super powerful, but some of the best solutions are taking us out of the lab and putting us right back on the farm, looking at ways to work with nature instead of fighting against it.
There's this approach called agroecology, and it's a total rethink of how we farm. So instead of those massive fields with just one crop, which is basically a desert for bees, it's all about diversity. It's about keeping the soil healthy, using good bugs to fight bad bugs instead of nasty pesticides, and actually designing the farm to include things like wildflower strips and hedgerows for bees to live in. And this quote really nails the whole philosophy behind it. The goal isn't just to save the bees. It's about building a whole system that's stronger and healthier for everybody. When you create a farm where pollinators are flourishing, the entire ecosystem starts to regenerate. And that means more stable food for us in the long run.
All right, so we've talked science, we've talked farming. But the future of bees also hinges on changing our economic and cultural relationship with them. And a great place to start is with the one thing everyone knows them for: honey.
Now here's something that might shock you. The honey industry has a massive fraud problem. It's estimated that up to 30%, that's almost a third, of the honey you see in stores isn't real honey at all. It's often cut with cheap sweeteners like corn syrup. This isn't just ripping you off, it's crushing the honest beekeepers who are trying to do things the right way.
So how do you fix that? One really cool solution is blockchain. I know, it sounds super complicated, but the basic idea is actually pretty simple. A beekeeper logs all the hive data on a secure digital record. Then, that jar of honey gets tracked every single step of its journey.
When you pick it up in the store, you can just scan a QR code with your phone and see that entire unchangeable history. You get to prove for yourself that you're buying the real deal.
But it's not just about the market. There's a cultural shift happening too, which is really interesting. It's called bee tourism. And yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. People are traveling not just to a beach, but to visit beekeepers and get these immersive, hands-on experiences. You get to suit up, get right up close to the hives, and learn all about the secret life of bees.
And this is more than just a quirky little hobby. It has a real economic punch. For a lot of small farmers and beekeepers, adding this kind of tourism can boost their income by a huge amount. We're talking 30 to 50%. That's a massive incentive to keep their bee colonies healthy and thriving.
So, wow, we've looked at robots, genetics, farming, even finance. Where does all this leave us? Let's try to pull all these different threads together and get a picture of what our future with bees could actually look like.
I think the biggest takeaway here is pretty clear. There's no single silver bullet. There's no one easy fix. Saving the bees isn't going to come down to one single invention. It's going to take a little bit of everything. A whole mosaic of solutions that weaves together high-tech labs, smarter farming, and honest economics.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important point. After seeing all this incredible innovation, it's pretty obvious that the question isn't, do we have the tools to save the bees? Because we clearly do. The real question is, do we have the will to actually use them, to change our habits, to reimagine our place in the world, not as the masters of nature, but as partners with it? Because the future of the bees, when you really think about it, is totally wrapped up in the future of our own wisdom.